Good evening. My name is Cuscopia, and today I am here to read classic fairy tales by Hans Christian Andersen. Indeed, today we will be reading The Steadfast Tin Soldier. With a name like this, we gotta know that it's legit. It won't be a troll story like the Elfin Hill. It won't be some random fan fiction like the Saucy Boy. Oh, you should check that one out. So, my guess is it's gonna be another Nightingale, or at least a Daisy. I can hardly wait. So let's not hold back at all, and let's just get going. The Steadfast Tin Soldier. There were once 25 soldiers who were all brothers, as they were cast from an old tin spoon. They all carried a gun in their left arm and looked straight forward. The uniform was red and blue. The first words which they heard upon seeing the light of day, when the lid was taken off the box in which they were packed, were "Tin soldiers!" These words were uttered by a little boy who had received them as a birthday present, and clapped his hands for joy. He then put them in rank and file on the table. One soldier looked exactly like the other. Only one, who had been cast last of all, when there was not enough tin, was not like his brothers, for he had only one leg. Nevertheless, he stood just as firmly on his one leg as the others on two, and he was the one who became remarkable. On the table on which they were placed were many other toys. But what caught the eye most of all was a pretty little castle of cardboard. Through its small windows one could look into the rooms. Before the castle stood little trees surrounding a clear lake which was formed by a small looking glass. Swans made of wax were swimming on it and were reflected by it. All this was pretty, but the prettiest of all was a little lady who stood in the open door of the castle. She was cut out of paper, but she had a frock of the whitest muslin on, and a piece of narrow blue ribbon was fixed on her shoulders like a bodice. On it was fixed a glittering tinsel rose. My apologies. On it was fixed a glittering tinsel rose as large as her whole face. The little lady stretched out both arms, for she was a dancer, and she had lifted one leg up, so that the tin soldier, there we go. She was a dancer, and as she had lifted one leg high up, so that the tin soldier could not see it, he thought she had only one leg, like himself. "There is a wife for me," he thought. "But she is very grand. She lives in a castle, while I have only a box, which I share with 24. That is not a place for her. But I must make her acquaintance." And then he laid himself at full length behind a snuff box which was on the table. From his place he could see the little well-dressed lady, who continued to stand on one leg without losing her balance. At night the tin soldiers. At night the tin soldiers were put back into their box, and the people of the house went to bed. Now the toys began to play, to pay visits, to make war, and to go to balls. I'm such a child when it comes to. All right. The tin soldiers rattled in their box, for they wished to take part in the games, but they could not raise the lid. The nutcrackers made somersaults. The slate pencil enjoyed itself on the slate. They made so much noise that the canary woke up and began to talk, and that in verse. The tin soldier and the dancer were the only ones who remained in their places. She was standing on tiptoe, with her arms stretched out. He stood firmly on his one leg, never taking his eyes away from her for a moment. When the clock struck 12, suddenly the lid of the snuff box was flung open. There was no snuff in it, but a small black jack-in-a-box who had performed his trick. Oops, got bamboozled. One soldier looked exactly like the other. There is a picture of all the tin soldiers and how one of them has only one leg at the very back. Tin soldier, said the Jack, don't covet things that do not belong to you. The tin soldier pretended not to hear anything. All right, wait till tomorrow, said the Jack. When the morning had come and the children were up, the tin soldier was placed on the window sill. All at once, whether through draught or through the jack, the window flew open and the soldier fell headlong down into the street from the third story. That was a terrible fall. His one leg high up in the air, he stood on his helmet. Oops. He stood on his helmet while his bayonet entered into the ground, between the paving stones. The servant and the little boy came at once down to look at him, but although they were so close to him that they almost trod upon him, they did not find him. If the tin soldier had cried, "Here I am," they would surely have found him, but he did not consider it proper to cry out loud, because he was in uniform. Seems legit. Now it began to rain, first very little, but soon more, till it became a heavy shower. When the rain had ceased, two boys passed by the soldier. "Look, there is a tin soldier," said one of them. "Let us make a boat for him." They then made a boat out of a piece of newspaper, put the tin soldier in it, and let him float down the gutter. Both ran by the side and clapped their hands for pleasure. Heaven preserve us! There were large waves in the gutter, and a strong current too, for the rain had been pouring down in torrents. The paper boat was rocking up and down. Sometimes it turned round so quickly that the tin soldier trembled, but he remained firm. He did not move a muscle, and looked straight forward, holding the gun in his arm. Suddenly the boat was driven under a large bridge which was over the gutter, and there it became as dark as in the tin soldier's box. "Where am I going to?" he thought. "That is the fault of the black jack-in-the-box. I wish the little lady were here with me in the boat. Then I should not mind how dark it was." Then came a big water rat which lived under the bridge. "Have you a passport?" asked the rat. "Give it up at once." But the tin soldier was silent and held his gun tighter than before. The boat was rushing forward. The rat followed, gnashing its teeth and crying out to the chips of wood and straw, "Stop him! Stop him! He has paid no toll and has not shown his passport." The current became stronger and stronger. The tin soldier could already see the light of day where the bridge ended. I'll start again from the top. The current became stronger and stronger. The tin soldier could already see the light of day where the bridge ended, but he also heard a roaring noise strong enough to frighten a brave man. Just think, the gutter ran there, where the bridge ended, into a canal that was for him as dangerous as for us to cross a big waterfall. He was already so close to it that stopping was impossible. The boat drifted on. The boat drifted on. The poor tin soldier held himself as stiff as he could. Nobody could say of him that he had blinked an eye. The boat rapidly whirled round 3 or 4 times and was filled with water to the very brim. He must sink down. The tin soldier stood up to his neck in the water. Deeper and deeper sank the boat. More and more the paper became wet and limp. Then the water closed over his head. He thought of the sweet little dancer which he should never see again, and it sounded into his ear. Oops. Farewell, soldier, true and brave. Nothing now thy life can save. Then the paper boat fell to pieces, and the tin soldier, sinking into the water, was swallowed up by a large fish. It was indeed very dark inside the fish, much darker than under the bridge over the gutter, and in addition it was awfully narrow. But the tin soldier remained firm and lay down at full length, holding his gun tightly in his arm. The fish was swimming about and made most extraordinary movements. At last it became quiet. It seemed as if a flash of lightning passed through it. The broad daylight appeared, and a voice said, "Hello, there is a tin soldier." The fish had been caught and taken to market. There it had been sold and brought to the kitchen, where the cook was just cutting it open. With 2 fingers she took the tin soldier round the waist, carried him into the room to show everybody the wonderful man who had been traveling about in a fish's stomach. But the tin soldier was not proud. They put him on the table, and there, what strange things occur in this world, he was in the same place where he had been before. He saw the same children, and the same toys were on the table. There was also the pretty castle with the dear little dancer. She stood still on one leg and held the other high up in the air. She too was steadfast. The tin soldier was very much touched, and he nearly shed tin tears, but that was not becoming of a soldier. He looked at her but said nothing. Suddenly, one of the little boys took up the tin soldier and threw him into the stove, without giving any reason for this strange conduct. Surely it was again the fault of the Jack-in-the-Box. The tin soldier stood there in the strong light and felt an unbearable heat. But whether this heat was caused by the real fire or by love, he did not know. His colors had vanished, but nobody could say if that happened during his journey or if heart grief was the cause of it. He looked at the little lady and she looked at him, and he felt that he was melting, but still he stood upright with his gun in his arm. All at once the door flew open. The wind seized the dancer. She flew like a sylph into the stove to the tin soldier, where she was burnt and gone in a moment. The tin soldier melted down into a lump, and when the servant cleared out the cinders on the next morning, she found it in the shape of a little tin heart. Of the little dancer, only the tinsel rose was left, which had become as black as coal. And so it is the tin soldier. I'll leave this pretty illustration here in the frame while we go into the discussion portion of this stream. So, curious things to note are, first of all, the constant reminder that he never let go of the gun, and he did not do things that he felt were unbecoming of such a serious soldier. So there are a lot of writing elements in this story, portraying the steadfastness of this character. He hardly reacts, never worries, never screams. When there is the opportunity, chance, and motive to scream out for help, he does not do so because he is steadfast in being a soldier of renown and true valor. So that is a theme around the way that his attitude is described. Outside of that, there are two things that I liked about the story. One, it is the ordinary, well, not, I wouldn't say ordinary, that's bad, but it's certainly not that odd to see this kind of tragedy in an old story, especially when it comes to love. So all of these stories usually, as we know, as you probably have heard of fairy tales, they do not end well. They do not go well, even halfway into the ending. So it doesn't surprise to me that it ended with both of them perishing. But this illustration speaks a lot about what really mattered. See, I believe the point of this is that the soldier had no regrets. The soldier did not regret the pains that it went through and the tribulations that he went through and all the troubles that he went through, nor did it regret, in truth, his death and the way he died. He took everything in stride. He pursued his ambitions, which in this case was the girl that he wanted to meet and marry, I suppose. I don't know how that works with toys, but that was the intention proclaimed by the writer. The tin soldier wanted to marry the little dancing doll. um, and he got to kiss her in the end. He got his feelings, which seemed to have gone over everyone's heads, that he seemed to have not displayed or manifested in any way, actually came off pretty clearly to the dancer, who then proceeded to show them in return, give them in return. You know, to love and to be loved in return is the quote of that musical. And it is one that the story reminds me of. I like that it ends with the tin soldier having formed a heart, and the tinsel rose being left of the girl dancer, because they are symbols of their lack of regret and of a life well lived. They are symbols of love conquering death as far as their emotional states are concerned, if you know what I mean. So, in the end, he didn't despair because he had love. He just was very happy that he had love and that he experienced it, and then he died. So I like this story. It's not hugely deeply impactful. The Nightingale is still, I really like it. There's a lot going on in the Nightingale. The Daisy is very poetic. This one has really nice descriptions. A couple of things that I also noticed that I can comment about is the Jack in the Box and the rat talking about a passport. I got to think about the rat and the passport a little bit more. But in terms of the Jack in the Box, I found it curious that in the end he was blaming the Jack in the Box for the child throwing him in the stove. Now it's interesting that the writer wrote it like this, because the Jack in the Box warns the tin soldier, and then the writer says, like, either by the Jack in the Box or not, he went out the window. And then, he blamed the Jack in the Box when he got thrown in the fires. And the writer explicitly says, for no good reason, the child threw him in the fire. So, there are two ways to look at this particular plot element, let's call it. There are two ways to think of it. One, the Jack in the Box is representative of negative force with a personality, like the devil, who's behind the scenes motivating events and people to screw you over, essentially. Screw us over. Let's talk it like that. To screw us over. That's one interpretation, and the Jack in the Box is just representative of that. And that even though it did its best and it succeeded in everything it wanted to do, it didn't succeed in what it wanted to cause upon the Tin Soldier, which was despair, punishment, sorrow, and all of that stuff. It didn't, because the Tin Soldier did get the love. He got to see that she understood his love, and even got it in return. So he failed. That's one way to look at it. The other way to look at it is that sometimes there is no invisible force conspiring against us. Stuff just happens, and we can be predisposed to blaming it on some kind of intelligent conspiracy against us, perpetrated by supernatural or completely natural beings. Natural beings would be normal people in our lives. So we are very predisposed to blaming this on people, because not being able to means that it really was outside of our hands. And there are two things that the human soul fears the most, I believe. One is the unknown, not knowing. So that's why we fear death, I believe. The other thing is not having any impact on something. Like, one thing is not having control. Like, we don't have control over an earthquake, right? But another is having zero impact on a situation. And to give an example would be, we can't control an earthquake, but we can stay clear of areas where earthquake happens. We can do certain things, but sometimes no matter what we do, we still get hit with an earthquake. Crap still gets flung at us, and we take it in the face, and then we have to be steadfast upon these miseries and upon these disastrous events. It is important to be steadfast and stay true to who we see ourselves as. In the case of our main character, of our protagonist, there was a valorous and very serious soldier. But in my case, in your case, it will be other thing. But we always have this person that we see ourselves as. We always have this person that we see ourselves as, that we hopefully are always working towards being and acting as. And what usually veers us off course is exactly events that are outside of our control. Events that we caused, we can kind of rationalize if we're in a good mental space. Because if we're not, we might just go into a self-blaming, self-deprecating, blah, 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 blah cycle. But if we're healthy, if we're mentally healthy, we can deal with stuff that we have impact with. So, for example, I forgot to submit my electricity counter, so now I got a stupid bill to deal with, and I gotta make a call and go through a talk and convince them to give the money back that they took already for the extra counter. They have to, But I think to myself, I could have just checked the electricity counter, then I wouldn't have to deal with this. So this kind of thing doesn't really rock our sense of selves or our sense of the person that we want to be and act as. When we really lose our cool is when stuff that is completely outside of our control and is caused by no one that we can perceive, no intelligent force that we might have anticipated or influenced. When that happens, it is very easy for us to despair. But if we stay steadfast and just ride on the torrent of misfortune until it freaking comes to an end, we will find ourselves in a familiar place, in a very recognizable place from which we can pursue our aspirations and try and become the person that we want to be, and get what we envision that person would get. Right? I like what I'm saying. I was like, does that make sense? Yes, I think it does. I think I like what I'm saying. In terms of, I think there is something behind the big water rat asking about a passport and complaining that there's no passport. The rest of the adventure, I think, is just a writer going through a fictitious set of adventurous events that for the soldier to go through, a number of perils to endanger the soldier that should worry, concern, preoccupy, and cause the soldier to break apart, yell for help, and lose composure. Um, so all of the events, I believe, are just I see the writer coming up with them just to implement that plot direction, that plot line. But when it comes to the big water rat living under the bridge and asking about the passport and stuff, that has to be something more specific, has to be like some kind of concept that the writer is trying to portray. And I don't know if he failed or if I did not pay enough attention, but for the life of me, I can't think. I'll just be honest. I really can't think what I can't make. I don't know what to make of it. Look, there is a tin soldier. Let us make a boat. Where am I going to? This is the fault of the black check in the box. He blamed the black check in the box. Have your passport. As to rat, give it up at once. Stop him. He has paid no toll and has not shown his passport. Because there's no logic to it, because it's just a toy in a boat. So, and the rat doesn't actually try to hurt him, doesn't actually try to catch him, really, just running after and yelling. I mean, there's gnashing its teeth, maybe that sense of danger, crying out to the ships of woods. I don't think it's just a dangerous element to upset the tin soldier and test his resolve and steadfastness. I think there is something to asking for a passport. It's just such a random thing, but at the same time, I really don't think it comes out of nowhere. But for the life of me, I can't make out what it could mean. I cannot make out what it could mean. I mean, you could make the direct comparison that it's some kind of immigration thing. Well, not necessarily immigration, but traveling thing. Um, Maybe he's alluding to how you shouldn't need a passport, to the ridiculousness of the concept of needing a passport to travel, in the sense that you might be stuck in a river and they would still ask for your passport because every piece of the border is being controlled, and maybe there's something, but I think that kind of interpretation is projection, is a contemporary, very 2019, let's call it, a very 2019 based projection on what the writer, could be a gal, on what the writer could be trying to say with this particular portion of the story. But for the life of me, I don't know. But I think the Jack in the Box is very interesting, and I think I got a good handle on that. Either one of the options lends itself to the importance of being steadfast in the face of a perilous journey and despairing events, and that if we can stay true to who we want to be, because staying true to ourselves is normally a bad thing unless it is true to our faults so we can fix them. But staying true to who we want to be and staying steadfast with a clear perception of that person, that is an important lesson. I don't know that I would think this is too complex an execution for a child to understand. They might still like the story. They might, they will probably, a child will probably understand the concept of the love, um, and of course death, if depending on the age. But as far as everything else I talked about, the importance of steadfastness, I don't think that's a lesson for children. Yeah. Well, that's all I got. I'm sorry I couldn't figure out the stupid what the meaning of the behind the stupid water mouse. You know, I'm honest with you. In the past stories, whenever I think there's no meaning to it, I'll just tell you, and I can tell you like I don't think there's any meaning to most of the adventure that he went through. But I am pretty sure there is a meaning to the water mouse asking for a passport. But I can't make it out. Um, so sorry about that, but the rest of it, I think I did a pretty good job. I hope you enjoyed it. This is Cuscopia signing out.